I really appreciate you guys. You're about the only show I watch anymore on YouTube as far as these kind of things. All those, some of these conferences I always like to watch, because I realize when I watch them the second, third times, the things I missed the first time being here, and your mind wanders and you go down rabbit trails and all that type of thing. But my wife and I were both raised in the Mennonite church, and we were part of a very kind of legalistic, strict, we had rules that make the Baptists look like they were liberals. And so that was kind of what we grew up in, and I was the oldest. And you know, I know my parents loved me. They did the best that they could for me. But there was something about that religious system, I think, that kind of held back from them really. And until my dad passed away about 6-7 years ago, there was still that wall that religion put there. And you really, you know, for a while I used to get mad at him, but the longer it's went, the more pissed I get at just the religious system that really wouldn't allow our relationship. You know, we couldn't talk about things that we disagreed with, and we couldn't talk, you know, have these discussions. And so, so that's kind of, you know, that's just kind of the background. And, you know, we kind of did the typical things in our culture growing up, getting married. We have 3 kids, we got 9 grandkids. But for a long time, it just kind of lived life, you know, living in that culture, going to church, you know, teaching Sunday, doing all that kind of stuff. And about the age of 40, I don't know, for some reason, well, it was God give me just this desire to seek Him and to study scriptures. And for the first couple of years of that, I really kind of turned into a Pharisee. I mean, I got really involved in the church, you know, and I was on all the committees and heading up stuff, and kind of became very involved in that process. But after a while, it just seemed like I was just busy, just doing stuff, and there really was no fulfillment in it. And I've always suffered from anxiety, so I was always kind of anxious about different things. And so I started looking around at, you know, well, maybe some other denominations got a better grasp on it. And one of the first, you know, for especially the conservative Mennonites, we're all Arminians. You know, you can gain and lose your salvation 6 times a day, depending on the last thing you did or said or thought or that type of thing. And so I got interested in just this street preaching, and I went to this street preaching convention, and we went out and heard all these sermons, and we went out and did street preaching and all that. But one thing I picked up there was eternal security, and that was like a first step for me that God kind of gave me, I think, on this journey, that wow, I don't have to worry about it all the time whether I'm saved or not. God saved me and it's taken care of. And so, but there was just something about that message that they had that was just condemning, and you know, we'd go preach and send everybody to hell. You know, we had a whole list of sins that we'd go through, and so from that I kind of, you know, went into the charismatic thing for a while, and through all this I got involved in prison ministry, and I would sit down with these guys, you know, and there was 2 things that I think that really helped me. One is, you know, we talked a lot about choices in life, the choices they made, but I soon realized these guys couldn't make a good choice because they didn't have a good basis for their choice. You know, they were in prison. Very likely their parent or their dad was in prison, or someone in their family, because that's kind of the community they lived in. And, you know, and they were worried about their kids ending up in prison, but they really couldn't help them because they couldn't help themselves because there was just nothing there. And you know, what to me seemed like an obvious decision, because I had the benefit of being raised by a loving family and all that, to me seemed like an obvious decision. To them, it just seemed like craziness. There's no way I could do that. And so I started to, and out of that, then I started to wonder, well, why would God let Satan win? It's just generation after generation after generation, and there's nothing to stop it. It doesn't seem to be any way. You get a guy once in a while that would, kind of grasp on, but that always seemed to be a special revelation for that person. Something hit them that they were able to gain some freedom. But so I started and one other thing, one time we were out doing some evangelism. We got back, we were sitting around talking, and I remember saying, what if in the end we all get up there Judgment Day and God just saves everybody anyhow? And we all laughed, but there's something in me that was just struggling with all of this. So I read Rob Bell's book, Love Wins. I don't know if any of you have read it or heard of it. That would have been kind of my first look at it. And then Brian McLaren had a book, The Last Word and the Word After That, and that kind of opened up my eyes to the possibilities that maybe there is another way to look at things and the way to read Scripture and all that. And then of course, it was Tent Maker and website and but I spent, I don't know, was it 6 months or a year, I think, every night in my office just reading the literature and digging through the Scriptures and trying to, because I wanted to make sure that when I believed I could base up, and back up spiritually. So anyhow, that kind of led to where that was kind of my first step into some of these truths, where I finally just got a grasp of God's love, God's realization of love, unconditional love. That was another thing I could never understand. People talk about God's unconditional love, except for a couple conditions. And so, yeah, and I was working for a prison ministry at the time, and of course, like a lot of you said, once you learn these truths, and actually the ministry was based in Atmore, Alabama, but I couldn't shut up. I had to tell everybody what I was talking about. They got back to the powers that be, and I got fired. But, which in the end was one of the best things that ever happened to me, but the time was very painful for my wife and I. But, so that's kind of, and then I've been up to see Clyde a few times. We don't live that far apart. And just continuing studying and looking at the other truths of the Trinity and the sovereignty of God, death and all those kinds of things. So I'm really looking forward to what we're looking at today. But today, there's a lot others that I could add into that, but just recently I've kind of come to the place where I feel like I'm kind of just living in the reality of it. I don't do a lot of studying these days, other than just watching some videos and once in a while, and helping with the e-books has kind of forced me to look at some things and whatnot. And some days I don't even know if I think about it that much, but I live in this reality of just peace with myself and peace with other people, and not having an agenda with people, and living with people, and with my kids and my grandkids and the moron that cuts me off on the road.
They're not saved.
Huh?
They're not saved.
But I find the reality of living this way is just the peace of not having to fix everything and not have to figure everything out, and and this is the season I'm in now. I'm kind of maybe open some, maybe look into something, but for me right now, that's kind of where it's at. And I've talked, Dean, we've talked about just even people that disagree with us, that maybe agree with us on a lot of things and whatnot, is I don't have to fix it. Yeah. I don't have to change it. We can, you know, we're all here today, and I'm sure we have different opinions and stuff, but that's okay. I can learn from you. Hopefully you can learn some things from me, but anyhow, that's what I got.